Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to another episode of SplatterCast. I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And on today's episode, we're covering a little movie that I suggested. I found it's a gem that's kind of close to my heart. Something that's I didn't think a lot of people knew about, and Luke, you didn't know
I did
about it,
not.
so that was a good one. I always like when we're introducing new films to people, especially because it's
I
like
hate it.
we've been
I like a
friends
regular
for
rotation, and you know this.
we've been friends for quite a few years, and it's one of those things where we're always recommending movies to each other. So it's always nice when there's one or two that like we can slip in every once in a while. It's like you've never seen this, and or I've never seen it, and we just get to talk about it because I always love hearing your opinion because we don't always agree. So like that's something that I've
Yeah.
noticed like over the years. We don't always agree on movies, and that's always a really great topic of conversation. I tend to fall on a little bit more of, I would say, the trashier, like Redbox, Sci-Fi
You
Channel
do.
movies. I do love
100%.
my stuff like that. As to where like I notice like a lot of your taste, you kind of fall more into like that nostalgia, like really underground 80s nostalgia kind of vibe where you're like you'll look into something like that, or even today, like you'll find more interest in like the smaller kind of movies that I would say have a little bit more of a studio or like a story rather than just a big production would put out. You know what I mean? Like you're looking at stuff like the Clovage Killer and stuff like that that like I didn't even know existed. So it's like we kind of
Yeah.
differ in some areas. Um
Yeah, because I mean, like I learned very early on that you love your creature features. You know what I mean? Like those
yes.
are your bread and butter. And I see, and we'll probably get into this later on, not in this film here, because this is where it kind of gets a little dicey for me. Where 80s, even no matter if it's like indie, terrible, low budget. It was still filmed. You had basic requirements for the most part of what you can film on and what you did. So even if it was a low budget film, it still fell in line to with what was regularly seen. Whereas you know, it's great that things are being made now with people who don't have necessarily a lot of money, but like if something's filmed on a DSLR, I can tell that it's filmed on a DSLR and it takes me out. Like there's a lot of things on Netflix that are like, "Oh, this has got a good concept." And then when I watch it, I'm like, this doesn't feel real to me." And maybe it's like an elitist thing, I don't know, but it really does take me out of it. So it's like a lot of things, even in the mid 2000s, you started getting a lot of that stuff because I think technology became more accessible to a certain degree. So you would get a lot of these indie filmmakers shooting on things that weren't necessarily in line with a lot of the things we had been seeing previously, and it just doesn't feel as professional as something like that I see in the 80s. So a lot of times it's easier for me to get into something that's more obscure in the 80s than it is for me to get into something that was more obscure that are in the mid 2000s, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think personally, if you're right on the money with that, like, I feel that way too in a lot of aspects, and I especially can feel that point of view mesh really well with creature features for me because, like, I watch stuff from like the 80s, 90s, creature features wise, and there's a lot of really cool stuff because I think they were still like the CGI buzz hadn't plagued anything
Yes.
yet. So they had to rely on practical effects for the most part when they had a lower budget. And like that really adds to that. Like, I mean, this isn't necessarily like I mean, it's made by Toby Hooper, but Crocodile
Yeah,
is
yeah.
one of those things where it's like, it's not a great movie, but the fact that they still use practical effects, and everything for the most part, that's right when they start really getting into the CG stuff. Because there's a couple of scenes of CG in that, but they still were basically had to use practical effects all they could.
Yeah.
And like that's where I kind of see the quality thing there. Because like once you get to the like mid 2000s, which is kind of surprising for the movie we're talking about today, because it came out in 2006. Um, we kind of get to that point where CG is just everywhere. So you're using it for all your monster movies, all your B-rate monster movies, and it just doesn't hold up the same. It doesn't really give you that, that kind of, I don't know what it would be. I guess it's just like that flavor, I guess, to it,
Yeah.
where it's like, y at least with movies like this, like what we're gonna talk about today, there's something tangible there, and I think that adds to the suspense and the horror really well.
Yeah.
Um, if you can say there is any in a lot of these Sci-Fi Channel movies, because like, I think something that I'm gonna bring up in this that I'll kinda bring up now is just that it's kinda like maybe my whole mission statement to this is that I think that, like, this is one of Sci-Fi's, I think, first, original movies that they put out. They bought this movie and put it out after it was made.
This is a
Uh,
sci-fi original? Is
yeah,
that what this is?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, they bought it and put it out, but it's one of those things where it's just like, this is, like, such a higher quality than what we get nowadays, and it's like, I think that there's, like, a little sweet spot in there where it's like they tried. They really did try. They weren't just doing Sharknado, you know what I mean? Like, and just, like, really
Yeah.
easy throwaway shit like that. They were still trying to, like, really find a director with a vision and just, like, really let them play with tension, let them play with true horror, and
Yeah.
not just dismembering people with shark twisters. But, which, being a big shark fan, you'd think that I'm at least somewhat amused by Sharknado. I can't stand those movies. I just, they're so boring to me. So maybe we'll have to get into that at some point down the road.
Please, let's not. I I feel like I would have no fun. And, like, this makes sense to me because, watching we haven't even discussed what the film is, but watching watching the opening to this, I was like, "This feels like a sci-fi original film." But and it's weird because that works as both a compliment and as, like, an obstacle in my sense because there's only a handful of really good sci-fi original films, and most of the ones suck. So it's like I can't explain it. It's this feeling I get, and it's like um the beginning of this one to me was like, oh, this is it wasn't like, oh, this is a sci-fi original. This is like, oh, this is a sci-fi original because I get a different tone just from the setup of it. I get a different tone,
So's
and that's
credits,
what I got
man.
from this.
It's those credits. I honestly will say it. But yeah, no, I totally agree. So I think without further ado, we should probably introduce the movie we're talking
Unveil.
about today. So the movie I recommended is Abominable, which we are titling the episode. Big quote from Otis here, the caretaker. Hey ass monkey. One of my
Lovely
favorite
quote.
moments. Literally leads into one of, I think, the most creative kills in any Bigfoot monster movie I think I've ever seen. This really shows, like, in this particular instance, like, how much of a labor of love this was, and we're gonna get into Otis because he kinda plays dual roles on this production,
Yeah.
and, it's actually kind of admirable. Because I will say, although he's probably he's a terrible character as far as just, like, likability, like, he's awful, but, he's, I would say, doing a serviceable job, the actor is, but we'll get into what's going on with that in a little bit. Uh,
And just I just wanna touch on it 1 minute
yeah,
here
go ahead.
because, you know, my first viewing, I say I agree with you where he's not a likable character, but, I'm gonna say on my second viewing, he didn't really do anything that was really bad, I don't think. I mean, like, yeah, he's a questionable character, but, like, he wasn't, like, horrible to Preston at all, I don't think, but
No, I mean, I
we'll
would
get
agree
into it.
with you there. He's not the worst, but he's definitely comes off as arrogant, I wanna say,
Oh, yeah, for
and just,
certain.
like, such a tool. Like, I mean, I would hate to be getting hit on by him at a bar, like, honest to God, like, if
I
I
would
was in
love
that
it.
situation. But we will save that, we will get into it. Yeah, so 2006 is Abominable. This movie is one of those ones I discovered it on the Sci-Fi Channel, funny enough, and, it was just something that, like, I was just so taken aback when I saw this movie for the first time. I was like, "Holy crap, like, this not only has a really cool looking monster, but it's just like it just felt like it was on a completely different level." And, like, I was just so scared because like that I will admit as a kid I got scared from a lot of sci-fi movies. One we touched on in our first episode, just very briefly, Beast of Bray Road was goofy by today's standards, but did actually intimidate me a little bit. I was pretty scared. And I can't wait to get into the opening in a minute here because that is I think some really great tension being built there. But just to highlight a couple of the cast members, we got Matt McCoy as Preston Rogers, Haley Joel as Amanda, Christian Tinsley as Otis Wilhelm, Kira Ann as CJ, Jeffrey Combs as Buddy the clerk, Natalie I'm going to butcher this, uh, Campagno as Michelle, and Michael Deek as Bigfoot. So he is playing our monster, which is kind of funny because apparently this guy's like super tall as is, but he ended up like they put him on like lifters, so he
Yeah.
ended up being like almost 8.5 feet tall. I want to say by the end of it. So you're taking this big guy and you're already just like pumping him up even more. So it's like, we still have a few others on here that also need to be mentioned as well. Paul Gleason has a small role in it. He's the principal from Breakfast Club, for reference. And then we have Rex Lynn as Hoss. Lance Hendrickson has a small role in this, and of course the mother of all '80s films. She was basically played a mom in a ton of movies. Dee Wallace, another great one here that we
And I
can.
think she was going by D. Wallace Stone at this time, wasn't she?
Was she really?
I
Oh, I
think
guess
that
that
came
would
up
make
in the
sense. Yeah,
I think
because
that
she
came up
would
in the
have.
credits at that point.
Yeah,
I was
so
like,
I
"Oh,
guess put some respect on that name, Dee Wallace Stone. My bad.
yeah, come
Um,
on, man. What are you doing?" This now and this was like, the main cast, pretty much unknown.
mhm.
I think from then at that point and today, really, I mean, like, I didn't recognize anyone, but, like, looking at the cast on IMDb after you had told me about it, I was like, "Man, we have a lot of main names in horror at this point, especially for 2006, where it was like, I mean, horror is in sort of a renaissance now. So the name Jeffrey Combs means something today, but
Yeah,
like
but did it back
I don't
then?
think so necessarily that much in 2006 to a lot of people. Um I think to really basic cult horror, but the internet was just growing at that point. So now I think it means more to a general horror audience now. Dee Wallace, Lance Hendrickson, like a lot of them mean so much more today than I think they did in mid 2006 or in the mid 2000s because I think horror still kind of had that stigma of ugh, it's not real filmmaking to a
Yeah,
certain
I mean,
extent.
especially stuff that popped up on TV, because this would be
Yeah.
considered a TV movie, at the time, which is kinda crazy. Because like, the I will say, like, to highlight, the work by, Ryan Schifrin and his cinematographer, Neil Fredericks, this movie feels, much higher budgeted than I think it actually was. I think there's a lot of really great stuff in here as far as building tension, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But I mean, I gotta hand it out to him that just from the actual production of the film, it is very high quality. You can tell this is a labor of love. Someone really thought about how they were going to shoot this and the kind of vibe they wanted to give, especially with the setting of this. Basically, I've heard this on the internet a couple of times since we were going to cover this. I went and looked at a few other folks' videos and stuff. Um, it's just Rear Window with the Abominable Snowman.
Yeah.
So, and it works. I think it's a great concept. I think it's a nice play on that aspect. It's like Alfred Hitchcock, but you put fucking Bigfoot in it, and he's murking people left and right.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think like as far as your main cast goes, you're right. Like there's a lot of heart from like Matt McCoy and even Christian Tinsley. He does a really good job, and I think they sell the movie a lot. Now, some of the side characters, like you can't really do much with them. You know what I mean? Like especially, I say the weakest part being all the girls that aren't Amanda
Yeah.
over there. They really don't get very good representation, which kind of sticks out considering it's just one of those things where it's like she's got some representation. You get a little bit about her backstory. You get a lot about Matt McCoy, obviously, and a little bit about Christian Tinsley. They just feel like real people. Even Lance Hendrickson and Jeffrey Combs just really feel fleshed out.
Yeah.
Uh, And
And
then there's just some characters in there that are just meant to die, obviously.
yeah. And like overall, like looking at this film, I was really surprised at almost the concept of it, I guess, because you don't really get that kind of thought out high concept in a lot of these films. So after seeing that, I was like, I was intrigued. But when you first said, "Hey, what do you think about doing Abominable from 2006?" And I was like, "Oh man," just like looking at it and you kind of explaining as to what it was because I knew it was gonna be a little creature feature deal
Yeah.
from mid 2000s. I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm up for it." So, I had to call my doctor because I knew I was gonna need something that over the counter just wasn't gonna cut. So I had to abide by Dr. Raynard's orders.
Woo! Much better. Hey, what are you doing?
Let's get this show on the road.
Oh, I was listening to that.
What do you say we lay a few ground rules right now, Preston? Dr. Rayner, he released you into my care. That means I'm going to be calling the shots from here on out. The way I see it, we're going to spend the next 3 days up here together. And we could spend those 3 days the easy way or the hard way. Do we understand each other?
Oh, geez. I'm sorry to hear about that, but at least you're taking the doctor's orders, doing what you got to do to get yourself back in shape here. Yeah, folks, in the segment, we're just basically, we kind of already have started getting into it a little bit here. We're kind of premature here, but we are now going to basically just kind of review the film. I think I want to hear Luke's raw thoughts because, like I said, I grew up with this movie. This is something that kind of re-downloading Tubi onto my PlayStation. I was just kind of like, flipping around through there, and I actually found it, came across it because, of course, Tubi's a great spot for some creature features. They got a lot of bullshit on there, and I just soak it
A lot
all
of
up.
gems.
Oh yeah, lots of stuff. They do have a lot of good stuff, but like, it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, there's all the crap that I'm talking about when I say fast
Oh
food
yeah.
horror. There's just so much of it. And then even lower budget stuff that's like somebody literally shot this for probably $10,000 and put it on there themselves. Some of that not being so bad, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, in my search and everything, I came across Abominable, and I just thought, God, I have not seen this movie in so long, and I really wanted to bring it on here. But with that said, Luke, this was a new one for you. So I
Completely
just want
new.
you to completely just unload on me here. Let me know what your thoughts are overall. Just tell me everything about Abominable.
Well, like honestly, I I had my reservations going into this because I was like,
Of course.
I don't know. I'll do it for the novelty of the podcast, just to be able to say that we covered this film. But I did not have high hopes going into it. But like when I did my research on it, and then turning it on, I was really surprised by the concept of this because a lot of these concepts like this aren't really that thought out. Like, um, just we've had so many of these kind of, I guess, Bigfoot movies that it's like, what really can you do to kind of make your film stand out? Um, but kind of adding that element of Rear Window in here, because the director did say, I think in that interview that he wanted it is like basically Rear Window. This was one of his inspirations for this film. Um, I think it was just so interesting to add that element because our main character is already at a disadvantage and essentially helpless. So watching this movie, I was intrigued by the storytelling, and I know you kind of touched on it a little bit. And I'm guessing it probably goes to the budgetary reasons of everything, where there are a lot of characters in this that I would have loved to have seen go more in depth with, which I don't think really get to their full potential because I don't think you can really spend that much time with them in terms of scenes and stuff like that. My critique for this film is there are a lot of great cameos, but a lot of those characters don't really do much. And it's like, I feel like not having those characters in this film would have saved so much money and maybe been able to flush out the other characters that we do spend that are meant to be the more of the main cast. But I'll say overall, I had a lot of fun with this movie. It was not a chore to watch the second time going through because I actually wanted to look for different things maybe I'd missed in that first viewing. And I'll say after that second viewing, I liked it even more.
I'm really happy to hear that because like that's definitely I think part of the charm of this movie because like I had to watch it a couple of times myself gearing into it. So like I had watched it on Tubi before we had even talked about doing this and I was like I
Yep.
want to cover this. Like this is definitely going to be probably a pick soon. I got on Amazon and I saw that Blu-ray was on sale. I think it was like $15 for the day. So I was just like, I'm just gonna get this. And it was next day delivery. So I got it, immediately threw it in and watched the special features and saw the behind the scenes. And I just got engrossed in it and just was like, this is definitely what I want to talk about. I kind of had to settle on it because like it's just right up my alley. And I think that it's not nearly as bad. So it makes me happy to hear that it's at least it was enjoyable for you. And it wasn't the worst experience ever. Like I didn't drag you through the mud just yet. If I do that, it's going to be probably with some shark content coming up in the
I'm
summertime.
guaranteeing.
So
Guaranteeing
it's
that's what it's gonna be.
I'm not going to do it that early. I won't hurt you yet. But
You're gonna
yeah,
get my hopes up, is
I
what you're
think
gonna do. You already did with Abominable, and then you're just gonna throw something complete shit at me.
I think that there's a couple that I'm gonna try my best to at least surprise you again. Not all of my creature features are fast food horror, but yeah, I mean, dude, like this movie just to me was something where it's just like it is not the shiniest gem in the bunch, but it is a nice little gem that I just love coming back to. This is something like I said, I've seen a dozen times, whether it's on TV. It's free on YouTube as well as Tubi. So like you can just punch this into the search tab right there and you'll be able to find it. So it's just one of those things where it's like it's so accessible and for it being as high quality as it is, for just being available in so many places, I was just like, man, I think that it's a right film to talk about. And there's only a few handful of people I see online who've really dove into this movie. So like it just seemed like it was ripe for the picking for me. And I think just looking into it, like Ryan Schifrin just really came in with a vision, that kind of rear window storytelling, giving us a character that's, been through so much, as you said. Like he's really been through the ringer, and he's had to deal with a lot with the death of his wife. I think they say it's only been not even a full year since their accident. So, like for
No,
him to be
yeah.
coming back to this place where his wife, just for context, yes, of course, we're going to be spoiling the movie here. So if you are intrigued, definitely pause this, come back to it, and check it out. But if you're just wanting to get into it, his wife and him were climbing up on this rock, infamous suicide rock, and they ended up. There was an accident to where she ended up falling to her death, and Matt McCoy was then crippled, so he is in a wheelchair, and that's why he has Otis Wilhelm, basically coming out here helping him basically through his doctor's orders, as we said, is just trying to get him to basically come back here and conquer his fears, uh, come through and try to, I guess, rehabilitate him a little bit, make him comfortable with the area again, and just hopefully bring him some kind of closure. But obviously, even from the opening moments, you can tell that he is just not into it. Preston Rogers, Matt McCoy, he's not ready to come back. Like he is definitely on the cautious side, I would say. And
Yeah.
I think that's played brilliantly by him. I think that he does a great job. And it's probably one of the reasons why I think this movie stood out to me as much, just because I think the whole cast, even I would say, like, I'll give it to the cannon fodder too. Like, everybody's really trying in this movie. And I guess that's what I'm trying to highlight is like, this movie isn't just here for the Bigfoot. There are characters in this movie. There's something underneath there with that story of his wife and him going through this accident and him trying to face that fear. And I think that's just something you do not see as much anymore when it comes to movies like this. It's like everybody's ready to just throw the campers in the forest and have them get eaten. And I think that just what a unique concept. Like I gotta say again, the level of care is why I think I give this movie such high marks, other than it just being a badass creature feature to me.
Yeah.
Because like it truly is. I think like as a creature features go, look of the monster's great, gore is great, just general tension, fantastic, and we'll get into that a little more later. But
And
yeah,
and
go
how
ahead.
you're talking how about, like, not a lot of people have covered this movie. I honestly, I feel like if this movie was made 20 years earlier in the 80s, a lot of people would talk about this movie. But since it goes into the mid 2000s, I feel like it's overlooked. But this is
Yeah,
um like to me, it doesn't feel like an 80s movie when I'm watching it, but the concept itself feels right in line with an 80s movie, I feel, because they tried to give their characters a little more depth here. Um, like, as we were going into this, the clip you chose between Otis and Preston, like, for me, explains their dynamic so well, and that's the initial time that we see them. And what a unique relationship there because again, I mean, this movie does fall a little bit into that toward the end of it where it's like, you have the male hero in a sense and then the female and that's usually the dynamic that we go with. You see with Friday 13th, Halloween, all that type of stuff. Um but they really went somewhere different. I really would have loved, to have seen them kinda more, I guess, elaborate on that relationship of, patient and caretaker and let that be the main story, just because it was so unique, and I can't really think of um, any other movie that kinda has that relationship, that dynamic as, like, the main dynamic of the film.
yeah, it's definitely unique. I mean, it's definitely got that, kind of the luxury of kind of pulling that out. Like it's just a really fresh idea. I would say, like you said, with that dynamic, because it could have as easily have been like, his brother or his brother-in-law or something like that, or somebody, of relation to him, a best friend taking him
Yeah.
up there. But no, it's just an orderly, a dude that he has to take care of him. He is working when he's doing this. So it's kind of like, it is definitely intriguing and definitely something that you don't see too often. And it does add to the film because, like, I would say for like a good portion of it, you really kind of get that sense that Preston's not being taken serious. Like we, the audience, know what he's seeing is real, but it's tough for the people around him the few people he does get to interact with, especially Otis, to kind of really not even like you kind of get why Otis is like not taking it very seriously because like it does sound hyperbolic. The man has said that he does not want to be here. So he's
Yeah.
just doing whatever he can to not be here. So it's like it creates that effect of just like the people around him think that he's going mad, but he's absolutely not. Like there is definitely something wrong here. And it just creates that fantastic dynamic. I mean, like it's just again, like it's like I said, it is basically the rear window concept, but I think it's just handled in such a nice way here. And I mean, other things for me basically saying here for like my review portion of it is just I want to highlight, like I said, the cinematography from Neil Fredericks I thought was cool. I thought that it was really well done with a lot of the fog, a lot of the, just the blue lights and everything like that. Really sold that kind of cold mountaintop night kind of thing that you see and what they're going for. I think he did an excellent job shooting this film. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that side of it?
Um, okay, so my one thing, because watching the documentary, Ryan Schifrin talks about, they were all crammed into one little house.
Hmm.
Um, and like a lot of times I get that feeling, and I'm not saying that as in like, um, for me, it was a little annoying because it felt like,
Mm,
I mean, us filming things, stuff like that, where it's like, I want to get this specific shot. I just wish I had more room to do it. And I felt that through this filmmaking where it's like we're all crammed into this little space. I know what shot I want to get, but maybe there's a wall here or this is here. It's not set up for my shot that I specifically want. And I'm not saying that it was shot horribly, but I felt like, I don't know, for me, I was feeling frustration just being like, there's something that wants to be executed here, and maybe it's just only being executed 95% of the way that it wants to be done, because there are some shots where that have to be extremely close up, or there's some that I know there's a couple scenes on Preston where it looks like the lighting is off, like it had to be a close up and they had to go film it in a different area, so we had to try and replicate light, but we were just off a little bit. So it's like I could see that. I felt there was some sort of frustration there where it was like we're getting what we want, but not 100%, if that makes sense.
I think that's a fresh take for me on that because like I didn't get that sense, but I mean, when you're talking, there is one sequence I would definitely agree on that. It's when they go to that closet just after Amanda comes to the. I guess once you
Yeah,
get that third person in there, where
yeah,
Otis is laying over there, and then you got that third, then you got her coming in. But when they're going to that closet and they keep cutting back from the doorway to kind of that living space where we spend primarily most of the film with Preston,
yeah,
I think that that's where I guess I could start to see that a little bit more from you, because like it's definitely felt like the space was getting limited, and like
yeah,
because they kept going back and forth from those two shots. But again, I mean that's just the struggles, the trials and tribulations of a low budget movie, I feel. So like I can kind of forgive that because like I think once you get outside, I think that that gets really impressive. I think that that's where it really starts to sell it for me, especially in this opening. I think this opening is super effective and a really good way to kind of lay the film out. Like for those who don't know or haven't seen it, it opens with Dee Wallace and I believe it was Rex Lynn. Yeah, Rex Lynn's character. They're waking up in the middle of the night to their horses just being slaughtered. They can hear it out in their yard. And they go out there with their dog and they come up on the corpse of this horse that's just been eviscerated. And it's just so effective because it's like I just put myself in that situation where it's like I'm getting the fuck out of there. Like Rexlin has a shotgun and everything, but like something killed this horse. And he even says it's like some kind of special horse or something, like a really big one.
yeah,
He mentions that, and then it's like, this is something that even a bear wouldn't fuck with. And it's just like that's really good stuff. Like that really builds it up. And then of course you see the silhouette of the Abominable standing over there, and that gets him to go inside. The one thing that I will say that always gives me like chills up my spine is seeing the shadow at the window
oh yeah,
walking across because they're just standing against that door. And I'm just sitting there like that fucking thing is could just literally rip that door down like a paper plate and then just like eviscerate you guys. But surprisingly, and I think a good twist on the usual stuff when it comes to these, they survive. It doesn't even
yeah.
attack them. They just come back outside after a few minutes and see a big old Abominable footprint. So I commend that. I think like that's the stuff in this movie that really sells me. I think you make a good point, and that gives me something to go back and look at next time I watch this movie, as I want to see if I get that feeling a little bit more. But for me, I think where this movie really goes full speed is when we have shots like that opening, or just like scenes like that opening.
Yeah.
And then like I think the fire, the campfire scene, another fantastic scene in my opinion, not just for dialogue and character, but just the way it was shot, the way it's handled, and even the attack right after. Fantastic.
And that's where it's like one of the things I really wish, like, this the concept is unique. I just wished, and this is where it kind of gets into screenwriting, and you really have to uh toe the line with that because you don't know what you can do, and you want to build the tension. So, but you want to open up the character a little bit. Where I think Preston, being stuck in the house, um, is very limited in terms of storytelling because there's not much for him to do. Like I do find that they did random close-ups of him moving in his wheelchair, things like that, because there wasn't really that much for him to do. I wish he almost would have had a little bit bigger space where he was completely confined into. Um, like I not necessarily go the route of misery, but I love that route of him being stuck in that house and kind of going from room to room, which I don't
Yeah,
know if we get enough of Preston with that. And we do kind of. I think this was one of Ryan Schifrin's. I don't think he's got a big credit list of writing or directing, but it does seem like there is a little bit of those, I guess, novice uh, screenwriting things that you kind of do, where it's like the female lead just had her friends murdered, runs in the house, and we're in this high tension situation, and then we stop, and he says, "I haven't always been in this wheelchair." You know what I mean? Where it's like, I don't know
yeah,
if this is the time we do this, where it's like, I think that would have been an interesting concept to be like, if all her friends are out and she's at the cabin and Preston's there and he's just out in the woods, and they go for a walk or something like that, and then that's the appropriate time to do that. Or at that point, do we even need to know that? Because we as an audience have already learned all this stuff previously. So why does she care at this point? Other than for him to stop and elaborate onto that he's in the wheelchair. And then
yeah,
also like where he's like he's got to explain to her why that there are reasons of why an animal would attack in terms of being hungry or they're territorial and I don't know if it was supposed to be played for humor or not, but he goes, I don't think that thing's hungry after he just killed her friend. So I was like, I don't know. I don't know if we're playing for humor here, but I don't know if that's an appropriate joke to make to someone whose friends were just murdered. So I mean, like there are a couple screenwriting things in there that kind of irk me a little bit, but um it's just like one of those things where it's a low budget movie, but it doesn't feel low budget, I guess. You know what I mean? So it's like a gold star in that aspect.
yeah. I mean, you have to give and take in some places. I will admit that the screenplay definitely has a couple of moments that are just very, I want to say, safe. As much as there's a few creative aspects in here that are great, I agree with you that there are a couple points where it's just kind of like, okay, like what are we doing here? Like that's a great example with just the line delivery of that.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, you bringing up Misery was something that I was just like, okay, like that's a strong case to make there where it's just like, okay, that's cool. Because like you're right, that movie does take place in like a lot of just one like basically house. Um, same situation here. But I mean, I guess just the way Rob Reiner, and it might just be a budgetary thing too, because like the way Rob Reiner was able to capture that
Yeah.
aspect and like really give you that space was definitely impressive. I mean, like he's fantastic, but it's one of those things where it's like the skill level you can see. Yes, you do see that it's like with someone who's a little bit more experienced and has a little bit more money, they can probably do a little bit of a better job with that. But I'd say for a creature feature like this, if those are some of your major complaints, that's not so bad. I mean, that's
Yeah.
definitely that gives you, like you said, a little gold star there. But I think maybe time to kind of move into our next topic there.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
talk about
Well, I
that.
mean, like I said, I was pretty happy with this film. So I did not have to take my prescriptions at all. But I did
Oh,
feel
okay.
after watching the film, I wanted to be one with nature. So, I had to step outside and go for a climb on Suicide Rock.
Hey, I want to show you something. It happened right up there. Suicide Rock. Not many people go up there nowadays, I can tell you that. Not since the accident.
Jeffrey Combs, man. Like I love him in this movie for such a small part. Like I
Well,
just think that he brings so much. You can tell he's having a lot of fun with it.
and I think out of all the characters, like I had said earlier, where um I feel like, not casting half of them or the majority of them, um you could have gotten more out of the budget in terms of, maybe an extra few scenes with some of the characters. But Jeffrey Combs for me you get the most mileage out of him. Like, I would have loved to have had his character in there. This isn't we're going back into it, but, like, this is another thing where I would have loved for more killings to have happened. We talked about this, like, off air where I would have loved to have seen almost like a Friday 13th aspect, like in Jason Lives, where they're playing paintball and stuff like that, and you have all these random killings happening. They're unrelated to everything else. So I would have loved to have seen like these random Bigfoot killings just throughout the woods all the time, and to have that one scene with like Jeffrey Combs at the gas station locking up for the night and then just being totally torn to pieces by our Bigfoot monster, I think would have been great.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that I wish they could do a little bit more of in this movie. I agree with you. Getting those just added extra kills, but again, I think we're dealing with probably a budgetary thing on that. But
Yeah.
maybe, I mean, because I don't see why you wouldn't. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things where it's like if I'm writing one of these, like if I can think of more creative kills, but maybe to the extent here, because there's a little aspect to this movie I want to talk about, but I'll save it for the last segment just because I brought it up with you when we finished watching it for the first time. I brought it up with you. I wanted to. It's a little theory I have about it, and I just kind of wish, like, if I could talk to Ryan Schifrin, I just want to like know a little clarification on it because, like, I think that really changes the way you would look at this movie, and
Let's get
just
an
kind of,
interview.
oh yeah, right, like that'd be amazing. Like, I wonder what he's up to right now, but I mean, he's a filmmaker, so I doubt he's got time to talk to us here. But yeah, I mean, talking about that, a little bit about all that, like just a couple aspects I wanted to touch on for basically the history of this movie. So this thing was released initially April 10th, 2006 in New York City. That was where it got its first theatrical run. Shockingly, it did not make a lot of money. I want to say, looking it over here, I think this thing only made about $1,800 its first weekend.
Oh man.
Yeah, but it was like I think just like one, if not a handful of theaters played it because it then quickly got picked up by Sci-Fi and it premiered October 3rd, 2006. So
Okay.
I'm sure it didn't sting too bad because like obviously you kind of get into this aspect where it's like Sci-Fi just bought our movie, you know what I mean? So like a lot more people are going to see it, a lot more eyes are going to get on it. And some 10-year-old kid's gonna watch this on Sci-Fi Channel and then talk about it on a podcast fucking 12 years later,
What a
13 years later.
loser.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like this is what it is. So it's like, um, I don't know. It's like kind of looking back at that, like if I could just pick his brain on some of that too, and just be like, what's the feeling on that? Is that more like is that like a complete win? Because personally, like at the level we're at, like as far as our filmmaking endeavors go, if Sci-Fi Channel was like, "I want to pick this up," I'd be over the moon. Like, holy shit! Like, so many people are gonna watch it. Like, so many people are gonna watch this. But that's pretty cool, especially in 2006, because like cable TV is still very big back then.
Yeah.
So it's like you definitely get more of an aspect on that. So I guess that's just kind of another thing. You kind of go with this give and take with the lower budget feel. Like they had the freedom to kind of do what they wanted with the story and really bring it in as best they could, but just like you know, only making 1,800 in the theater. Like I wonder how that felt. You think they kind of knew that this was going to be a very limited release and they probably weren't going to make a lot of money?
I think
Because I wonder
so.
what the intent. So you think the bigger intent was to sell to like a distributor like Sci-Fi or something?
I don't even know. I mean, like, because in the interview, I didn't he say he wanted to make like an '80s movie
He
almost?
did. He was very
Um,
much trying to lean into that.
and I think honestly, this movie was really just one of those things where he probably had in his head and just had to get it out. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I think maybe his intention was this could lead into something else, but I really want to make this movie. If there's nothing else I make, it's going to be this movie because it does sound like he's got a lot of love for this movie. And I will say that, um, I had said that, if this came out 20 years earlier, I think, it would be a more talked about film today. But also, I think if this movie would come out, today, it would have done better in the sense because talking about, Jeffrey Combs, Dee Wallace, they weren't um, looked at as they are like as iconic as they are today. But like again, the internet was around, but it wasn't like a big deal in terms of everyone being on it. But if you put this movie in today, I mean, someone just says, "Oh, there's going to be Jeffrey Combs, Lance Hendrickson, Dee Wallace. They're all going to be in this movie." Everyone's gonna be like, "Hell yeah, on board! I want to see what this is about, no matter what." And people will have fun with this movie.
And then
The
you
biggest
sell it
thing is
to a
it came out in
streaming service.
2006. It just gets overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say you sell it to a streaming service with those names these days, you know what I mean? Like a
Yep.
Shudder or a Hulu,
Oh yeah.
and
This
then
would
it
be if this was
really
on
becomes the
Shudder
movie of the
today,
week.
it
Mhm.
would be like it'd be talked about. You know what I mean? Like there'd be a whole talking point on Twitter about this movie.
Absolutely.
Guaranteed.
Another little factoid that I thought was kind of interesting would be, yeah, Ryan Schifrin's father, I think it's Lalo Schifrin. He is, he's the, composer for this. So he called in a personal favor there, from his father to come in and write the music for this. And I gotta say that's one of the stronger aspects. We haven't really touched on it just yet, but I really think that the music in this, it's really, really well done. I think that it really sells that 80s nostalgic feel. And I mean, this is coming from a guy who did movies like the Amityville Horror, and Dirty Harry. Sorry, I almost said Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry, but Dirty Harry, Cool Hand Luke. He even
Yeah.
includes the theme for Mission Impossible on his resume. So it's like this guy is coming up through the 70s and 80s and writing all these famous scores. And I think that you can really tell that that music adds another level of just quality to this movie, and why I think that you get that sense of that this is low budget in some aspects, but like it's really coming at it from like a little bit of a higher level. It's just in a weird middle ground where it's low budget, but it's like you have really talented people behind it that just elevate this movie to a little bit of a higher degree, in my opinion. So it's
I will
like I
say
think
this
that
is
like
like
this adds to it.
this seems like the most high budget, low budget movie
I
ever. You know?
think they
Like,
sell it really well is the best way I
yeah,
could put it. They really
because
work with their tools and they convince you.
you're gonna are you gonna talk about the movie poster? I'm assuming.
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's definitely if you wanna take away on that one, because that's also another thing that's just, like, adds that level of quality to it.
Well, the director said he wanted something very specific. To not. It's called Abominable, so he wanted something that's gonna display what the movie's about, but you can't unveil the monster in the poster because he wants to do that in the movie. So, um, he wanted something very specific. So the guy who did this poster was the guy who did the Indiana Jones and the Star Wars stuff.
Yes, yes, he was the guy who did all of, those very famous posters here. I'll pull it up. I didn't write his name down because 'cause I'm a moron, but, yeah, no, that was, he went back, he went old school. He went looking for the guy who made all the posters that he loved back in the day.
And 100% that's how you do it, I feel. Like, me and you have talked about it where it's like whatever film we're spitballing, whatever, it's like this would be the Scream Factory cover, with the
Exactly.
just how it looks, where it's like absolutely iconic. And I'll say like the cover of this is iconic. I think it's so well done. It looks extremely professional and it didn't date itself. This movie was very careful, I think, especially with practical effects. Um, the poster, a lot of things that they do in this movie, they were very careful not to timestamp itself. Where it's
Mhm.
like, oh, this is a product of that, or this is a project of this. Um, a lot of stuff in this movie was extremely professional and done to the best of their ability. And like I think what was it? I don't know if you're gonna talk about it, so I don't want to step on your toes, but he talks about going to George Lucas's ranch
Yep.
to do audio stuff. And it's like, again, extremely professional. Like it seems like a high budget movie, and it's not. It's like they took care of this movie to the best of their ability. That's why it's like, you're asking what the intentions were. It's like this was something I feel like he just loved. He had to do, so he took
Passion project,
every
100%
opportunity.
through and through. And that was Drew Struzan, is the artist. He's known for doing all kinds of classic posters, like you said. I believe Raiders of the Lost Ark. Basically anything that, like, if you were looking at that poster, that is what it is. Like that's the guy. So like it's one of those things where it's like it's definitely it harkens back to that. He did like looking at it here, I mean, he's done Back to the Future, all kinds of stuff on here. Like he literally is the
He's a
father of
legitimate.
80s movie posters. And it's like, yeah,
But
it just legitimizes it. Like you said, like it brings you back to that where it's just like, we got the guy who did Big Trouble in Little China and he's doing our poster. So it's
yeah,
like you're hitting those beats perfectly. I want to say where you are definitely selling this. But I think that about wraps it up for me as far as just like history production. Just a couple of topics I wanted to talk about. Um, oh, you know what? No, 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 no. We could get into this in another topic, but why not here? I kind of hinted at it with Christian Tinsley, Otis. You know, this guy, he's playing double duty here, and he is not only playing Otis in the film, he is the effects supervisor. He made the monster of this movie. He did all of the effects. He killed himself in the movie. So if you're looking at our little GIF presentation there for you today, he's doing that effect. And I gotta say, that is, in my opinion, the most satisfying and egregious kill in this movie, I say. Like it is just such a
um,
gnarly way to go and very creative, in my opinion.
yeah, and because they talk about the difference, and usually when something's bit, it's the other way, but they decided to go up and down instead this time, and I think that's so effective because you don't see that. And honestly, this was the. I think this would probably be the kill for everyone to be like, did that just happen? Like they
Yeah,
really
right?
did, and it's so well shot,
Yeah. Think
from
about those
every different
teeth
angle.
on teeth too.
Yep.
Like, holy shit.
Should we jump into the effects?
I absolutely think so. I think this is a perfect time to get into it because we can definitely run into that. But since we're talking about the history and everything of this film and kind of the background, I figured that'd be a good gotta throw him a bone in there too. But yeah, why don't you introduce us to our next topic there, Luke?
You know what? I got zero transition for this one, man. So
We're
let's just jump into the Flatwoods Monster.
Ooh, maybe it's the Flatwoods Monster. Oh, hey, please, zip it, will you, Dodo? I don't want to hear no more gibberish about no Flatwoods Monster.
It's just a joke, Sheriff.
Oh, yeah, real funny, ha ha ha. Monsters are a real hoot.
love it. Definitely just classic scene right there. You're getting into that like that's a very 80s scene in me, very to me in there, just
Yeah.
looking at that sequence because it's just like, of course, like we're poking fun at the whole thing of just like, oh, there's a Flatwoods monster. And it's like, yeah, there is. And he's fucking people up the mountain like right now. Like literally going ham on on these poor women who just came for, I think, a bachelorette party, maybe.
Yeah.
It's never
I think
really
that's what
brought
it
up,
was.
but yeah, it's just kind of like that's what it is. But yeah, this the Flatwoods monster. We're talking about the creature himself, the main man, the guy on the poster, everything, our backdrop for the day, the Abominable. This movie to me, I think like it's like, we're talking in our last show, a creature features, being
Yes.
that segment where we discuss the special effects and everything. And we talked about how it's just like, practical effects are really the cream of the crop. They're the way to go. And this movie full sends that with this beautiful, I say beautiful, abominable Bigfoot monster. I think is if you're going to talk about Bigfoots in cinema, there's Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. And in my opinion, then there's this guy because this suit is fucking awesome. Like I
Have
absolutely
you seen Harry and the
adore
Hendersons?
everything. I have. It's not scary, but it's a good movie.
No, yeah, it's a great film. And that's what I was thinking of too when I was watching this. I was like, Harry and the Hendersons. That that one is so well done. And I'll say this one gives it a run for its money, I thought too, because this was honestly, when you pitched this was the deciding factor for me if this was going to be something I was going to like or something I was going to hate. If this was going to be like a horrible CGI fest, I was going to be totally checked out. But this one does pull through. I'll say 100%. I'll say we had talked about this off air where I don't like his as much where he's like where he's got the clean look. Um, when he's biting Otis's head and he's just covered in blood, I think that's his best look. Like that's that wear and tear. And then I had also mentioned where I loved. I know I brought it up previously before I'd seen the end of it because I think I missed. I didn't watch the last 25 minutes of it, and I was like, I love that they had the axe jammed into his back and he was just walking around with that in his back. I would have loved to have seen those extras on him of just like previous kills and things of people trying to take him out and he's just like totally beat to shreds. I think that would have just g- given him more of a lived in feel where it's like when we initially see him, he looks totally clean. I'm like, I think we need a little more wear and tear on our monster.
I think that's such a cool idea too. Like if there's any way to add to it just to get a little bit more flavor on top of that is just you're right, adding things like, you could have like arrows in his back, old stuff like that, maybe like a hunting knife or something just sticking out of there. He can be really calloused up
Yeah.
and missing like fur patches in the back. Like it would make him look really primal. I think that's actually a good transition to say there is a recent Bigfoot film that also has some pretty awesome practical effects. Very different Bigfoot film in the aspect of how they present him. It's not so great on the acting side and the budget side. It's definitely that fast food horror, but it's called Primal Rage. Have you seen anything about this?
No,
Okay, so
not at
there's
all.
some really, really good Bigfoot effects in that too. Like they
Oh,
go all
really?
practical. It's like I want to say that movie came out in the teens for sure. I want to say it's like 2017,
Okay.
2018. But like it's not bad. So like if I'm comparing that, but I mean that is just one of those things where they yeah, they don't sell their characters very much. And then it's kind of just honest to God, it kind of just divulges into just being Predator by the end.
Oh,
So
perfect.
much to the point where the main character or the main guy character, I should
Dutch?
say, there's two leads. No, not Dutch, and not at all. But he's getting tossed around so much that he's just covered in mud.
Oh,
And it's
God.
just like it's a callback, you can tell, but it's not in any way just very.
And then the Bigfoot can't see him, and it
Yeah,
just
no,
ends.
he sees him, he fucks them up, but like it's just interesting. Um, but that movie, it's just like it's one of those things where it's like they nail it with that, but like this, at least with Abominable, it's like not only are you nailing the effects, but you're really hitting those beats really well. Like you're actually telling a story,
Yeah.
and I appreciate the heck out of that. But yeah, I think that they really nail it, and like it's so impressive when you watch that documentary on the Blu-ray of just how they put that this like head together because like it's literally remote controlled. So it's like
Yeah.
what you'd see with like Jurassic Park and everything like that. The eyes, the teeth, the mouth, everything functions as its own thing. And I love that shot that we get. They use it a couple of times to, I guess, for budgetary reasons that shot that you see in the GIF where the mouth is opening up and coming down, they
Yeah.
use it on Otis and they use it on Jeffrey Combs.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it is really cool to just see that mouth just attach the way it does and
And
just be able to consume people like that.
that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get into the effects when we were talking about the Otis kill. Like, as we see up there, like, when you see how that's done on the Blu-ray special features, where it's just the head and they're kind of just opening it up and clamping it down,
Hmm.
so great just to be able to see that behind the scenes of how that was actually achieved.
Yeah,
And
and
it's funny to see what getting that perfect shot, so nothing just outside of that frame is someone holding, the forceps to close the mouth. It's like
Yeah.
just so funny to watch that type of stuff, just to know what is outside of that frame that that camera's not getting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it sells it really well. I think that it's a cool effect. It's definitely effective, and it doesn't take it away. Even after you see how how the bread's made, basically with how they show you, I still think it's an effective shot. Like, I don't know if you could really just the way it's presented. I think they execute that kill because obviously, like we say, this is the highlight kill in the movie, but like they execute that so well that like I really don't think there's anything you could really say or do to that to really take away from that because it is such a shocking moment. And it's just a really high point for these special effects, not only for the monster, but for Otis and everything. Like, it's definitely that image sticks in your mind. When you think about Abominable, you're thinking about him biting that man's upper jaw and face off.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so unique, and it really is that, like, if you're a gore hound, like, that is for you, man. Like, this is definitely it'll sell that, and then the flop down to the body afterwards sells
Yeah.
that perfectly.
Yep.
Love it.
One of the other ones that I do like is the where he pulls the girl from after she gets out of the shower
Mhm.
through the
Oh,
window and
yeah,
holds her
so
up.
good.
I think that was so interesting to watch. It's like the Otis kill and that kill, I think, are probably the two most memorable ones out of the entire film. They're just so well done and unique. I wish, and again, we always go back to budgetary reasons, which is probably how it goes. Where we had talked about the cast, the females next door, um, where it just kind of ends up being like a real quick, pulling her through the floor and then smashing the other one's stomach. Like, to have so many, the two well done kills and then kind of just go real quick with the other ones, I was like, well, again, budget reasons, but to see if he would have had an unlimited budget, to see what else he would have pulled out of his hat for those
Oh, yeah.
kills.
I mean, for those being so creative, I would love to see or at least pick Ryan Schifrin's brain a little bit on were there more plans there? Because I will say that not to discredit the movie very much, but I mean, I know this might annoy some people. There are a couple of kills off screen, Jeffrey Combs being one of them, where you just
Yeah.
see it's an effective shot. I think it's definitely still doesn't really take away from the movie for me, but I could definitely see people being upset with that. And then also in the same scene, you have Rex Lynn, Haas. He just gets pulled off. And
Yeah.
same with honestly Lance Hendrickson too. So,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's like, do I want to see them get eviscerated? Of course. I want to see them get killed by this beautiful creature. But like it's just one of those things where it's like it's just what they had. They had to make cuts somewhere. They had to make decisions somewhere. And if that's what we had to lose to get the Otis kill and the window kill, sure, I'd see it. Like I get it. You got to take the trade. Maybe it could have
And
been
that's
just
where
as
it's like,
simple as them getting their throats ripped out. But yeah,
it's hard to judge this movie in a certain lens because, if you look at it like being made, this film wasn't going to be made 20 years previously because they weren't going to have the funds to do it. So it's like they barely scraped the funds together in 2006 to make this movie. So it was either that or this film doesn't get made. So there's compromises made everywhere. This isn't, if this was a multi-million dollar production, we can go in and say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you had all the funds, you just didn't
it's
make use
easier to
of it. Where
call it out. Yeah,
yeah, this one was kind of like, I mean, we're gonna get what we can get, or else this movie's not going to be made. So
hmm
it's hard to really judge it harshly on that aspect because there were probably, compromises made in order for this to even see the light of day.
absolutely. I mean, it's part of the deal. Like it's a business at the end of the day, really, too, that we got to be thinking about with these movies. Like they're made to make some money. So like you have to draw the line somewhere. One of the things I wanted to highlight too in this section was, we talked a little bit. I mentioned him a little bit earlier as Michael Deke as the Bigfoot. Really great performance, really sold that for me. I mean, with the animatronic head, but it's a little, I wouldn't say easier, but it's definitely you're assisted by that. But like the body performance too, with him pounding his chest towards the end and everything,
Yeah.
really expressing his just overall size and power at every turn is really impressive to me, and I definitely a highlight for me on that. So I want to give him a little bit of credit as well. I also want to throw it to Rex Lynn as well, because one of his conditions for agreeing to act in the movie, I believe you see in the documentary there, is he wanted to play the monster in one scene.
Yeah.
And I believe that scene is the opening. I think he's the silhouetted
Oh, is
monster.
that what he is?
I think so. I think that's where they were showing the pictures from.
I know
I
he's
could
got
be
that
wrong
picture of
on
him with
that.
the beer. Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Because the horse, the little horse dummy's laying on the ground when he's drinking that beer.
Yeah. So I
So it
think
has to be.
they did that there, which that's awesome. Like, I mean, that's just, you can tell that's like, that's an actor who's just like, I am just excited. And even in that documentary, you can see everybody talks very fondly of their experience on this movie. I mean, they're all professionals for sure, but they do talk fondly about their experience and, the monster itself, and just how they enjoyed their time working on this.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, you always you could have people that hate the movie at the time, and then it's become so iconic that they look at it 20 years ago and say, oh, I had a fun time on it, no matter what. It's like, well, yeah, now you're making a bundle of cash from it, where it's like no one's making a bundle of cash from Abominable. So it's like, those whatever they're saying is true. It's like, and it seems like they had such a fun time on this movie, where I think Dee Wallace is, she talks about going into the audition or whatever, and she goes, I was actually treated like a real actor. That was the first time I was really treated like a real actor, and it's like you could tell Ryan Schifrin had a love for the horror genre to cast as many people as he did, and to kind of just want to treat a Bigfoot movie with as much dignity as you can, like, because he really did love this movie. And like, to bring up the performance you're talking about, um, of the Bigfoot himself, where, you get this kind of clunkiness, powerful Bigfoot through most of this movie. And then at the end, when Preston's laying on the horn and, he's holding his ears and kind of crouching and showing almost a subservient attitude toward it. Like that stuff, a lot of people don't notice it, but that stuff is hard to pull off. That kind of range where you're not being able to use your voice, where it's like, you look at Predator, you, there isn't really much to do there. You can't really, throughout that movie, there isn't vulnerability for the most part, maybe toward the end, but even then he's not vulnerable because, he's gonna blow everyone up. But it's like, to try and switch that at the turn of a hat is really rough to do, and like it probably goes overlooked unless you're really looking at it and dissecting it. But it's like, just to be able to switch the way he does, I think is a big credit to him.
Absolutely. Like, that's a great example too of that, just that body acting that you can bring to it, where it's just like he's doing that. I think you bring up that scene too. I think one of the last big effects that we can highlight in this movie that I thought was really cool was ultimately the undoing the killing of the beast.
Yeah,
Was fantastic and just really a creative idea in my opinion. Otis, title of this episode, comes up and shouts, "Hey, ass monkey!" and drives an axe deep into the creature's back, and that's ultimately what does him in when Preston flips the car in reverse and smashes him into a tree, busting that axe through the chest. And very creative, something where I'm just like, okay, like I did not see that coming. It's just one of those things where it's like, just seemed like a throwaway thing, him getting stabbed
yeah.
with the axe, but no, there was purpose.
Yeah, I just thought it was a stylistic choice, when I had initially talked to you about it, and I was like, "Oh, that actually does play a factor into this." The one thing that I will critique it on is I really wish, as soon as it got drove through his chest, he would have died, instead of the kind of weird, he's
Lasting
kinda,
for a
like,
minute.
pounding, yeah, and it's like, I wish he would have just, smashed in the back. We didn't see it at first, and then Preston gets out and looks, and he's just dead, and like, that's a resolution. Then he crawls over to the lady, and that's the end of it. But I'm not gonna rake it over the coals for that one.
Yeah. No, I feel you there, and I think that that's still impressive just from like a technical standpoint of just how they were able to pull that off. But I agree with you. I did think it was a little weird how that kind of lingered there and he kept moving.
Yeah,
Which is funny because I think it's great that we had the same thought. But just all in all, though, I would say that like it's it still just didn't really take me out that much, especially for the resolution of that scene. We
yeah,
talked about the very end, which I guess we could talk about right now, and I kind of want to dip into it because our last segment's more our final thoughts. But like for me, I think that the fact that it's revealed in the final seconds of the film that it's not just one abominable. There's like 20 of them in the
yeah,
forest. And the fact that he didn't get up and walk away because they come up on the car and the tree, and you see the axe is snapped in half and the body is missing. It's just the idea that there's all these abominables, and they pulled their dead friend out of there, and now they're going to wreak havoc on the sheriff's department.
yeah,
What a great ending, I think, in my opinion. It really sells it, and it really makes me rethink the film because, like, the sequence where, like, Lance Henriksen and, everybody's getting Rex Lynn and all them are getting pulled off screen. I really think, and this is how I'm perceiving the movie nowadays, is that those are different abominables. I think those are different. They're not the same one that's harassing the people at the house. That's what I subscribe to, is that they were attacked by multiple out there, and the one that's by the house has been kind of sticking around. And he just dropped the body off at the cave because that's where they live, of the girl that
yeah.
he abducted earlier. That's just what I'm subscribing to, but because I think that that's just such a cool ending and such a cool shot.
I mean, is there even anything recognizable about that particular abominable that we can even say that that was the same one that was terrorizing that vicinity? Like the outside of the cabins. I mean, like when the one that pulls the girl through the window, is that even necessarily the same one as the one that comes back to the house? You know what I mean? Like, there's no distinguishing factor. I don't think, is there?
I don't think so. So, I mean, like, it's kinda really left up to interpretation, but, like,
Yeah,
I think that that's like I said, that's what my fan theory, that's what I'm gonna, subscribe to. That's another question I'd love to ask the director and just be like, "Was that your intent here? Or am I just, pulling this out of my ass?" Basically, because like, I think that it's just a really cool way to end the film. All those eyes, which I wanna say another great effect that
yeah.
they use a few times in the film, like, I think one of my favorite scenes that I didn't get to touch on, a little earlier is just when Preston first lays eyes on it, and you
Oh
just see the
yeah,
eyes in the forest, and then he starts trying to back up his wheelchair. Really beautifully shot. What a great way to build that tension, him locking the door and everything. And I will say, the most effective jump scare, I'd say, in recent horror, in my memory is, just after he knocks out Otis and the creature is at the window,
oh yeah.
because we are
The
literally trained the entire film. I know a few people in videos phrased it this way that I watched, where we're like basically trained and given this sense of security of Preston looking out that window the whole film, and
yeah.
then for him just to turn and be face to face with it. Holy shit, what a way to sell that. Absolutely love it.
And that's where it's like, I guess I would have liked to have seen, because he's face to face with it, right? And then he falls. Doesn't he fall and
He
he
falls
knocks himself
over and
out?
knocks himself out, yeah.
And I honestly, I would have loved to see them capitalize a little more on that, in the sense where it's like, where it's a jarring experience. Then he's knocked out, and then we kind of start back at baseline. Whereas, like, if we were faced with it in a situation right now, as in, like, we don't even have a time to adjust. We're adjusting as Preston's adjusting with his Bigfoot right there in front of you. And to kind of see where that goes, I don't know what kind of storytelling that would, you'd have to switch up the screenplay pretty heavily, but
Oh, yeah.
it would just be interesting to kind of have to go that route with it, instead of kind of seeing it and then kind of restarting. Um, but yeah, I think I would. I've talked about it several times on this podcast where it's like I think you should end in horror, and the idea of all those abominables with their eyes peering at the troopers, which is just like I think of the perfect ending for this movie.
Oh yeah, it sells it so well. It definitely gives you that sense of. I was thinking about this as I was driving today, knowing we were going to do this podcast. I'm just like, if I did a sequel to this movie, how would I do it? And I'm like, well, I would definitely call it Abominables, just like Aliens, so that way
There
we
we
get
go.
that out of there. And maybe I bring a SWAT team or the Marines into the forest, and we just do that. We just pull from old Jim Cameron. Just do that.
And then we find out that Lance Henrik's character was actually a droid,
Yes.
and he's
Mhm.
back in Abominables. Um,
Abominable. Absolutely.
but going back to one of the things I did want to bring up, I really would have loved again, probably going back to budget, or I don't know if they ever had this idea or not, where like you're saying, if a lot of those kills were not necessarily the same abominable, but like if we were watching this and there were things like kills coinciding with other kills that would be like, well, how did he just get from one place to the other place? Because that wouldn't make any sense. And we would be going throughout this whole film thinking this filmmaker has no idea what he's doing. But then it'd be like, at the end, it'd be like, oh, he didn't get to that other place. That was a different one. And we had to put
Right?
it all together.
Yeah, I think there's definitely if they had a little more time or the intent was there in the script, I think we could have really played around with it. I like the idea of, like you said, Friday the 13th part sixing it with like somebody out there playing paintball or, like a family camping or something, just getting terrorized by this thing. Like really ramp up that horror. Cause I think that Ryan Schiffer does a great job of uh building tension. I think that's
Yeah.
really where a lot of this movies really starts to succeed, other than the effects portion of it, is just that like he is excellent at building tension. Like I said, with him, I just think back to that scene of Preston backing up his wheelchair very slowly after making eye contact with the creature. Like, just creepy shit, man. Really gets under my skin. Cause, like, as a kid, like, watching this stuff, I'm walking around my house in the middle of the night now, just going to the bathroom, and we got windows, with the curtains like drawn out, and they're just looking into my big backyard. And I'm just like, fuck, what if there was just a pair of red eyes just looking at me right there? Like,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff settles with me and sticks with me,
Yeah. And we
And
talked
I
about in our
would
last podcast with like the Cycle of the Werewolf, where they have that chapter where they see the eyes in the night. I think it's the kids do. And it's like that type of thing is so unsettling to someone because you lock up for the night and you look outside. And I mean, like for me, like I check I have French doors and I always lock them at the end of the night. I make sure that they're locked and I always look outside, just to make sure nothing's out there, and half the time I'm expecting to see a pair of yellow or red eyes staring back at me. Hasn't happened yet, but we'll
oh,
see.
I hope not, buddy, because
It just
that would
resonates with
definitely
people.
it
The
does.
unknown.
It sells it, and I
It's
think
like
that's a good way of going about it.
it's like you look for something, but you hope to see nothing. But then the time that you do, you don't know what's gonna happen. So it's like always in your head.
100%. But I think
But
that what's up?
go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna
Oh
say
no,
I
I
think
don't know what
that
you're saying.
I think that it's is a good time, better than any, to move into our last segment here. Why don't you take us in?
Ryan Schifrin was great at building tension, but he was also great at building idiots. So there are a lot of dumb characters in this movie. So let's find out who the Darwin Award goes to.
Well, my question to y'all is, you sure you want to find it? Because some things are better left unfound.
This coming from a guy who chain smokes at his gas station hooked up to an oxygen bottle.
Thank you for the reminder. I believe I will.
I bet your lungs look like a couple old saddlebags.
Well, yeah.
Guess you never heard of the Darwin Awards.
Ooh. The what?
The Darwin Awards, they give them out to people who died doing the stupidest shit.
Absolutely love that scene. Really, I think that it's one of the highlights of this movie.
Jeffrey Combs just steals steals the show, to be honest. I definitely need to see him in more things. Just like we're gonna cover another movie that he's in here on the podcast within the next few weeks, I'm sure. But it's just anything that he's in, I absolutely love, and it's like I haven't seen that much from him currently, but eh, he's someone that needs more roles, 100%.
He's just a fantastic character actor. Like every character he plays, he really just sells. I mean,
Yeah,
everything from
he's
Reanimator up
full
to this,
board.
like he is, like it is, he's just really great. And I mean, he's got that long stretch of Lovecraftian films in his filmography, where a couple of them he plays very similar characters, scientists and whatnot, but like
Yeah,
each one of them he just sells it so well. And even this is so different from any of those. And like it's just a klutzy gas station attendee, who's talking about Bigfoot legends with his buddies in the woods, and like I love it. Like I absolutely love it. It's a shame he dies in this
yeah,
movie. It seriously is. I would have loved because in that scene where he's like, "I'm gonna leave now" and all that, would have absolutely adored if he actually would have gotten away
yeah.
because he believed from the start. But obviously, we wanted that scare with the jaws.
Oh yeah, where it's like it would have been fun just to have him at you know, we settle up after credits and then just cut randomly to him at the gas station talking to someone about Bigfoot. Just as like a little Easter egg would have been funny.
Absolutely. But the question I'm trying to pose here in my last segment for Abominable here is going to be is this movie underrated? Is this a hidden gem in your opinion? Or is this a movie that as Jeffrey Combs says is better left unfound?
I mean, for me, I definitely think this is a hidden gem for horror fans, 100%. I don't think it's a gem for a general audience in any sense, but there is a lot of fun to be had with this movie, and there are a lot. I mean, we've talked about it. There's a lot of care in this movie, where it's like you can't say that there was an effort put into the music or the effects or the shot list. They really wanted to go for it and make this credible Bigfoot movie. And that's what they set out to do. And I think that's what they achieved. I mean, on a limited budget, you can't really ask for more of this movie.
I would agree 100%. I know I've said it already a couple times, but to me this is definitely a hidden gem. I would say again, kind of tampering expectations. It's not like I'm saying this is the greatest movie of all time or anything like that. It's one of the best Bigfoot movies, but it's
Yeah.
definitely for horror fans, like you said it best. I think that, if you like this kind of stuff, if you're into creature features and you haven't seen it, you should definitely check this one out because it's just awesome, and I just feel like not enough people know about it. Like, it's just as it delivers everything that I would want from a sci-fi original, horror film about a Bigfoot. I mean, like, you get so much care, you get so much more put behind it, especially with these, actors, these legacy actors we have in here making cameos and small roles, but even to our main cast with just, like, Christian Tinsley, the effects supervisor who just was like, I just want to roll in this movie. I want to shoot for this, and Ryan Schiffer gave him a shot, and like that's super cool. He committed so hard to this movie too, which just shows the passion. By he grew out his mustache and he literally shaved a bald spot onto his head. He just walked
Oh,
around
yeah.
like that. Like
He's like,
that's
yeah, I had to
commitment.
walk around for for weeks of filming just like this.
Yeah,
And
and
it,
I mean, like, it's that kind of commitment and just the passion that you feel in this movie, it just oozes out of that. I just look at it like in my mind, it just oozes out of that Blu-ray case on my shelf. Like, it's just this is such a labor of love, and I will definitely go back and watch this movie a dozen times over, probably till the day I die. Because I always get
yeah,
a hankering every once in a while to just sit back and watch some Bigfoot carnage, and this is definitely towards the top of my list for
yeah. And I mean, like, this movie's like, it's punk rock. It's
that.
do it yourself. This movie wasn't gonna get made unless Ryan Schifrin went out and made it. And sure, he had some connections that maybe some other people wouldn't. But it's one thing to kind of use those connections to make a safe movie, whereas like I'm going to use my connections to make a movie about a Bigfoot. It's going to be a horror movie, and hope for the best here, So it's like you can tell he's got a love for the genre. He's got a love for just these kind of creature features in general. So it's a movie they did a respectable effort, I think, to try and make something timeless. And I think they achieved it.
I would agree. I mean, even with all the time that's passed since the movie came out, it's like I still watch this thing today and the effects still hold up and they definitely leave an impact and they leave an impression. And it's great. It's definitely one that I have fun recommending to people. And I'm really happy that you seem to have enjoyed it. And just like hopefully it's something I don't know if it'll end up on your Blu-ray collection, but I would hope that maybe this is something that you'd maybe revisit at some point and
Uh,
maybe
you
get a little
know,
something out of it.
there are there are movies where I mean I've probably ranted on my podcast several times, but where there are movies where there's so much potential where it's frustrating to watch because a director or a writer doesn't go a certain avenue with it to what I feel would be like a better movie. And they had all the resources in the world. But there are other movies that are smaller movies that I look at and I'm like, oh, there's potential to do this and potential to do that. And it almost gets you excited to watch the movie to be like, what else can I find in here that, if only they had more money to do something, they may have been able to achieve it. So I don't come at that idea from a source of frustration for this movie. I mean, I've watched this movie twice now, and it gets my mind going as to, oh, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that, about these because it's like, um, I, you know, I, I'm not really a creature feature kind of guy, but like, I will say that this movie here in itself has kind of gotten me inspired to, I don't know, take a crack at a Bigfoot movie. I'm not sure, but it's got me excited to think about.
Hey, I'm right here with you. If you want to talk Bigfoot movies, buddy, just give me a call because like I can give you some ideas. I
There we go. You
definitely
have an
I've
endless
floated it a
supply.
couple times. Yeah, like I mean, you watch enough of these things, you get your own ideas yourself where you're just like, this is what I would do. This is what I'd like to take a stab at it. Of course, main criteria being all practical effects. We got to get the guy in the suit. There's no way you're
Obviously,
gonna do it.
like
Uh,
werewolves.
yeah, we're exactly like werewolves. We're not just gonna put a guy. We're not just gonna put a guy and cover him in CGI. Not for this, but well, I think that about
I
wraps it
just,
up for us, buddy. Is
I
there any
well,
final thoughts that
I
you
just
have?
I wanna make. Hold on one second. I wanna make a. I think the idea should be that it's a sequel to Harry and the Hendersons, and it's like the
Okay.
movie The Guest, and he's like coming to John Lithgow's house.
Okay.
Just this dude, this abominable here, and he's like, "Hey, I was Harry's best friend," and he's just like hanging out with him, and they're like, "This dude's a killer."
Yeah, no, he just murdered all these people and now he's on the run and it just picks up from there. That's Abominables.
There we
Instead of
go.
instead of doing the aliens take, we do the guest. I absolutely adore that. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this episode here. If you haven't seen Abominable, I highly recommend you check it out because
It's streaming.
it is streaming. It's on Tubi and like I said, it's also on YouTube for free. So you can just hop on there and watch it anytime and
Well, at the time we're recording this anyway, it is streaming.
that
So,
is true. Things are changing. You could be watching this 4 or 5 years from now and get on there and we just look like a bunch of dirty rat liars, but
which is true, but we're not lying about this.
we're not trying to at least. We're trying to do our civic duty, our part. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you're looking for a Bigfoot movie, if you're looking for just a creature feature in general to just sit back and take a look at, this is one I'd say give it a shot because like I
It's
don't think
worth
a
it.
lot of people know about it, but it's got some stuff in there. And like I said, the Blu-ray was on sale on Amazon. I forget who put it out. I think it's like they're called like MPV or something like that productions, but they did a really nice job with it. You get a little collector's poster with it, which I'll probably throw up in the background at some point here. But yeah, it's just it's a nice film. It's something that I definitely would recommend and hope that you check it out.
It's a lot of fun. It's like one of those things where I think when you watch certain films, you kind of get creatively inspired, and I do think Abominable is one of those movies where it's like you can laugh at some points into it, but there's so much potential in this movie. It really gets you excited to think about what could be in this genre if more people take it seriously and try to get as much mileage out of their characters as Ryan Schifrin does.
Absolutely. I agree there, friendo. Well, I think that about wraps us up. So again, we're new to this. We've been doing podcasting for a little bit, but we haven't done anything with the video and stuff. So we're always looking for feedback. Feel free to leave a comment down here. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to cover, or if you just want to talk Abominable. We'll do our best to get back to you and respond. Also, follow us on Twitter at SplatterCast Pod. We'll definitely be posting updates, things like that, teasers for shows, and just in general having conversations about horror flicks, which is just what we love to do. But yeah,
We will
I think,
block everybody.
everybody who follows us. We're just gonna say sorry, we were blocked. But I guess that really about wraps it up. So if that's the end of it, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Ginesco. And as Anthony Perkins likes to say, we all go mad. God, how many times am I going to mess up?
Once more, we'll do it again in tandem. We all go a little mad
sometimes.
We'll get there.